Hey everyone, Hanetsune back here with another taco guide. This time I'm going to be covering Lillipa, which is perhaps unanimously agreed upon by the entire PSO2 community to be the worst time attack in this one. But in all honesty, I feel actually it isn't so bad as long as you actually get the shortcut skip. There is a lot to cover in Lillipa, and I actually probably might go through it twice. One time with the skip, and the second time without the skip, just in case if you, by some chance, mess up the skip. So first, starting off, uh, you'll notice there's some explosive barrels. You can use them to your advantage to kind of like wipe out enemies, but be careful of your allies because those explosions can and will kill them at a heartbeat. So first thing you want to do, you want to hit the switch, but if you go past this line right here, you'll kind of get stuck in a barrier and you'll have to kill some enemies before you can open it up. But you can hit this switch with from a range, which in actuality, there's actually two switches, one right as you can see, and there's another one right behind it. Multi-Razon 3 craft is recommended to just like snipe these switches just like that. But you can just hit the switch and just move on. To note, the switch that you see in front of you is required to hit to move on. The switch behind it deactivates barriers behind some explosive barrels, which you could use to help or not. If you're strong enough, you can destroy this barrier. Otherwise, just wait for all the enemies to spawn and just take them out. It's really easy to do so in higher levels, but you have to make sure you defeat all the enemies before you can hit this switch. And now when you move on to here, take down the enemies that spawn, and you can move on to the next area. These are the barrels from the switch in the beginning, over down in F5. Now here in the center part where it kind of gets a little wonky. First of all, make sure you always you mash through these switches when necessary before you take out the enemies. Or if you're in a party, you can have someone take them out, the enemies for you while you mash the switch or something, or vice versa. So now here there are kind of multiple pathways. You can try to go north, but you'll actually be blocked off by a barrier. You can try to go west, but you'll also be blocked off by a barrier. In the normal progression, they want you to go south. But what you can do beforehand, you can hit this switch right here with Razon. That'll activate that dome over there. And, well, actually it's more of a deactivate. And that will prevent you from having to go down there to kill the enemies that spawn from this dome later. So it's a good idea to always do. Another thing to do is good idea to have someone go through here and take down these enemies. Because you'll need these enemies out of the way so you can just go through it later. Optionally, you can hit the switch there and go for and take down the enemies there for a shortcut for the normal path, but I will cover that probably in the second run. So now I'm going to show what's known as blue barrier strat, or what was referred to as a blue barrier strat. So you could see this white barrier over there and such. That kind of prevents you from going through. The blue barrier strat is a way so that you could take down this barrier, which actually would be taken down at some point, and progress through. And it's good for people that don't really have that high equipment and can't kill things that quickly. So first what you want to do, make your way down south, use the barrels to help take down those enemies. And now for the blue barrier strat. So what you want to do, you could see the switch over in the yellow barrier here. You want to just run straight to that yellow switch and then just run straight back. And in fact, you don't need to bother with this mash switch over here. And how it generally works is just basically run through. On higher difficulties, you might want to jump to try to like get some of these Spartans out of your way. But here you can see the yellow switch and the white barrier over here. The moment you kind of like cross this line, you can see over here the white switch has kind of like disappeared. Normally you can just, but if you don't really want to like go precise, just basically run up to like the side of here and just start doubling back. And this way you don't have to kill those enemies, you save some time killing stuff. And the area beyond that is a little dangerous with the spar guns and the barrels and very narrow space. And that's the blue barrier strat. It's a short little like easy path for beginners that don't really have like that high equipment. And with that, mash this switch out and just go on, break the dome or kill the enemies. From here, this is the rest of this area here is really straightforward. There's like no other things to note about, or at least nothing too important to note about. Only other thing to note is over here, the barriers, you can use them to your advantage, but also be careful with them as well. Now, here you can probably already see D1 is a dead end, but there is a switch somewhere like right over here or something that would deactivate the barriers around the explosive barrels all over here, and also spawn a camp ship to help like provide some cover fire and all that. The camp ship, don't rely on it too much. I don't find it that helpful. But if you do hit the switch over there, you will have to kill some enemies to come out. And when you do open up those barrels, be careful because you can blow yourself up with those, and not a very fun thing to do. So there are about 5 waves of enemies here, and they just kind of like all split around. So you just want to make your way through and just kill everything. If you don't have the barriers open, you don't have to worry about blowing yourself up with like your attacks and such. For the Gillnesses, break them apart and just try to take down their core. But if you can't really reach the core, just well, take out the leg or the torso and the core will fly down to it. And that's basically the basics of Area 1 in a nutshell. Area 2 is where it's really most people find annoying and tedious and such. And it is more complicated. So first things first, just run up here and just take down these enemies. And now from here you have many paths to go through and such. But if you're running this solo, I advise you take the right path first, as it'll come in handy later. And I will also note that throughout this area there are some switches that will make the conveyor belt go the other direction and also deactivate the lasers, which is a major source of stress for pretty much everyone that runs this. So that's the first lasers, really easy to avoid. Go here and kill the enemies. Take note that the barrier behind the barrels are active, and hitting the switches to deactivate the lasers will also deactivate barriers from the barrels. Anyways, the first switch over for the right path is right here down in this corner in F6. You can run up to it, or you can just use text or whatever. Just do what you can to hit that switch. Now here, Hero and Bouncer with jet boots can make most of these lasers obsolete. But the second switch is right over here. you can hit it behind with range and such, or you can just go in right there. And I will note that that switch is actually entirely optional, as it will deactivate lasers in a path that you typically never go down. And the third switch over is right here, and there's no way for melee to get it. You have to use range. If you don't have access to multi-Razon 3 or Ilgrants and such, or any sort of like ranged weaponry, then you'll have to take the slow path and just hit it with a gun slash. Or shoot it with a gun slash, rather. And after that, make your way over here. The fourth switch is back over here. It's actually over in E5, but you can target it with range. This is another one that definitely needs range in order to hit. Make your way through. Take down the Gillness and the Gillnatch. Now, normally you would, if you're solo, you'd go down through this and hit that green, and hit the green switch that's down over there. But sometimes it doesn't really work out very well, in my opinion, for the skip, just due to something that can or can't happen. So what you want to do instead, if you're going solo, is take this telepipe, which will take you right back at the beginning, right over here. And now I'll detail the upper path. So first, down over in the upper path, first switch, right here. That would deactivate the conveyor belts over here, or the lasers over there. Go over here, kill the 2 signal beats just to move on. And kill these enemies. You can use the explosive barrels if you'd like, just to help you out. And just continue going forward. I will also show right now where the second switch on this side is, which is completely it's not as optional, but it helps. So you want to go into this area, kill those enemies right there, and the second switch is right there. Hit it with whatever you'd like. And that would deactivate the second set of lasers over on the right path. But if you go through solo, you don't need to go through that way at all. So run around this way, kill those 2 signal beats to move on, but before you do, I can showcase the third switch, which is right over there. So basically from where I'm standing, you kind of target to like right around there or so. You'll have to use range to hit that one. There's no way to hit that one with melee. And now just make your way through here. Kill the Gillness and the Gillnatch. You can use those explosive barrels to just basically bring the Gillness into the second phase, into its split part, and just take out that Gillnatch. Now, ignore this telepipe here. You don't want to use it. Instead, you want to go down through here, and you can probably see a blue switch right over there. Before you do that, if you're running solo, hit this switch. This will be very helpful running solo. Now, what you want to do, the blue switch is here, the green switch is here. If you kind of notice on the minimap, there's a pathway along row 3 of the minimap that'll take you back over to E3. And this is actually faster than just taking the telepipe over here, back to here, and then making all your way all the way back around over. And what you want to do is, I'll just keep this path over here, is to jump up here, hit this blue switch, and just start hauling Krev all the way over to E2. if you have the conveyor belts kind of going the other direction, you might want to just like jump over through it. And if you have jet boots or your hero, then you can just double jump your way up these boxes. It's slightly faster. And just run your way through these now deactivated lasers, hit that green switch. And once you hit that green switch, you want to immediately double back down to E3. And down this ramp, you'll notice some switches right here, blue and green. Once you hit them, you can probably see in the minimap that there's a catapult icon that just popped up. You can take this catapult over this white barrier over here, which you can't pass. Go around the structure and you see a telepipe. You go into the telepipe and bam, you're right there, right at the exit. And with that, just go in here and you can just take down Transmiser and be done. Now one thing to note is when you're fighting Transmiser, you could probably see in the map up here, but you kind of want to like, you don't want to venture too far off to the edges, because if you do while Transmiser's alive, you'll basically spawn some Sparzels infinitely, and at low levels they can get really annoying and really difficult to kind of deal with these Sparzels blowing up in your face while you're trying to fight Transmiser. So that's Lillipa with its shortcut. And now I'm going to run it again with some other things that you can take note of and other strategies. Okay. So, starting off over here, running around through like normal. Yeah, I might as well just go around here. Take down these enemies so I can show you the other switch. So there it is. The two switches are kind of just like stacked right on top of each other. And I'll note there's no reason to go down this way. It just leads to a dead end with some extra enemies to fight, and there's no point in finding them. So save yourself the time, don't go down that way. Mash the switch. So here in this central area, I'll showcase like a little like sort of shortcut you can do if you have, or a little faster travel method when you have more than 2 or 3 people. So first make sure you will hit that switch. And the next thing you want to do, go down here, take down the enemies. Now you'll notice a switch over here. This switch doesn't really do much, but if you do it, you could probably notice in the background that the purple barriers around the barrels over there have disappeared. And that's all that switch does. So now if you run into this solo and you have high enough equipment to not need to use the blue barrier strats, just mash through this switch here. Kill the enemies. Now, if you're on higher difficulties, you might want to consider kind of like blowing up these barrels just to like take out these enemies. Because the signal guns can chase you all the way over, and that would make you have to like kind of like backtrack around and kill them. And then you would just run down this pathway and go around. But as for another thing to note, I will showcase there's a little switch over here. By hitting that switch, you're basically gonna like deactivate the barriers around the barrels over here around like D2. So if you decide to ever hit that switch there, be cautious when you're fighting at D2. So I'm just gonna run through over there and skip the other corner with the Gillness there, as it's not really necessary to fight. And if you already cleared this path, then you don't really need to go back there and fight him anyway. Okay. So now we're over at D2. Barrels are all despawn. Barrels are all free to be blown up. So just be careful when fighting. And now here, I'll go up to D1. And when you go up here, you'll probably encounter a few spar guns first. And the switch is right there. Once you hit the switch, a barrier will come up and you'll have to kill some enemies before you can actually leave the place. But once you hit that switch, camp ship will appear down here, around here, and all the barrels around here are free. But on the plus side, if you use range, none of your shots can actually like travel over the barrels. And you don't have to worry about like blowing yourself up too much for like hero or something. But if you play melee classes, then watch out, because those barrels are really mean and dangerous. So that's all the other like bonus tidbits about the first area. And now I'll show the second area and all the stuff that kind of needs to be done in the second area if you need to go through it normally. So by normal progression of the second area, kill these guys, and you want to go through here and hit this light blue switch. Unfortunately, there's nothing to make this conveyor belt start going the other direction. So just kind of hop back through and then start going right. Take note, by hitting the lasers, you'll spawn some enemies and you'll prevent yourself from being able to progress until you kill those enemies. If you still know where the switches are, then you can just easily hit them and make things go a little bit easier, as there'll be less switches to kind of go through. Those enemies aren't really necessary to kill, but if you use auto target to like target the switches, they can get in your way. Okay. These enemies are also optional to kill. Alright, so now the reason why I state you want to take the telepipe over to the beginning and then before going through over there is because sometimes when you hit that switch and then you hit the green switch down over here afterwards, and you don't hit the blue switch that's supposed to appear here fast enough or within some sort of time frame, the catapult here won't spawn. And that's usually what sometimes messes up that skip. But if you're going to the normal progression, Hero and Bouncer Jet Boots can really cheese through these lasers. And just try to avoid hitting these lasers. But hit that switch. I should probably hit that switch before it despawns. And then just take this telepipe back. Okay. So now I'm just gonna blitz through this section, see if I can get that timing right. Alright, so I'm just going to show this path again. This time without the minimap completely centered up. So now I press that blue switch, but the catapult didn't spawn. And that's kind of the thing I mentioned with like the switch somehow just like not working sometimes. And once you press the green switch, it's like all done and forever. So now that this is completely messed up now, we have no choice but to go through this the way normally. So in addition to the normal progression, you have to go some other points. First place you kind of want to go to is that spot right there if you haven't already done so, which normally you wouldn't never have to go through here. There's a switch also over here which you're gonna have to hit as well, and another switch somewhere around either A2 or B2. Hit this yellow switch. And just make your way through like normal. A special little angled snipe right there. And now this area is open. Unfortunately, I don't think there are any switches to deactivate the lasers all around here. So from this point on, you have to deal with all the lasers. You'll have to kill the enemies over here just in order to progress on. 2 spar guns, 2 signal beats. Or signal guns and signal beats. But these lasers are fairly slow moving and you can avoid them really easily. Here, these lasers are a pain in the ass to like try to go around. If you're hero or bouncer, you can easily just kind of like blitz over them. What's even worse is that at some point, you'll be right here, you'll actually have to kill these enemies in order to progress on. Although considering the fact that you actually have to kill the enemies in order to progress on, it might be a worthwhile strategy to just trigger the lasers to just spawn more enemies and just kill them anyway. And that would just allow you to kill all the enemies without having to worry about tripping the lasers or anything. And kill these spar guns here in order to progress on. These lasers are also quite a pain to deal with. Most of them are actually still lasers, but I will note that you don't have to kill the enemies here. I'm just going to cheese through them, hit this orange switch. When you hit this orange switch, all the lasers here and the conveyor belt will be deactivated, and the conveyor belt starts moving the other direction. And from that, you can just go down here normally and go to the end. So it's just a little quick recap. Successfully getting the shortcut, you just need the switch here and here, and just take this path over to hit the switches that'll appear down over here, and take the catapult down over here to F3 and be warped all the way to B1 and go straight to the boss. Otherwise, you also have to take an additional stop to B6, B5, and A2 for the switches, and go through the switches that you can't really deactivate along row 2. And that's the other stuff for, well, at least the normal intended progression without the skip. Which is much more of a headache to deal with, and it's a lot more stressful. Transmiser again, I'll kind of show you exactly how far. So kind of like once you get to like around here, like all these sparzels will start spawning and such. And I believe they actually like kind of like spawn per corner, like per side. So if you go to each and every side, things will get really hectic with all the spawns and such, and it just becomes like utter chaos. Because they'll just keep on spawning forever. But once you kill Transmiser, everything will just start to despawn and run away. So you'll probably notice, like, pretty much getting like outside, beyond this corner here, on each side. I'll just kind of like run that lap real quick. So basically going any farther than like my character, than where my character is, this sort of like line that I'm like trying to like running around through, you'll spawn the enemies and you'll just have just like mosh pit of chaos. And with that, I believe that's pretty much everything to explain about Lillipa. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you kind of like make this less of a headache. Have a good day.